As we enter the roaring 20s and civilization takes a giant leap forward, I have to ask, well, what about the children?
Computers. Bringing families together since 1936.
I don't have any kids, so I'm not allowed to have an opinion.
True. Who's ready to play hockey?
Okay, Gulexa, live my life for me.
Gulexa?
Alexa.
I like it.
Welcome to the Epoch Podcast and another dose of mental foreplay. My name's Matt.
I'm Jen.
I'm Austin.
And I'm David.
And this week, I'm kind of running the show from an evolving parent point of view. Evolving Parent is a podcast that I do on my own side of things. Miss Jen helps me every once in a while. And I wanted to really focus on, as we enter into 2020 and this decade here, where great technological advances are projected by the end of the decade. There's some pretty lofty things that people speculate could be happening technologically. I'm focused on the children, and to kind of prep for this show, I had everybody check out a video of I think it's podcast episode number 60 for Glenn Beck's podcast, but it's called 5G and AI Everywhere. 2030 will be a new world. And he was interviewing Jeff Brown. It was, I thought, a pretty cool episode. He upset me at one point, though, because he said, nobody's talking about this stuff. And I was like, doggone it. I've been talking about this on my little podcast. We've been talking about this here. And so, and this episode just came out for him, I think, a month ago. So, the future, it looks a lot different than what we're experiencing right now. Some big leaps, especially they focused on 5G and artificial intelligence. Was there anything in there technologically that kind of threw you guys for a loop, or that you didn't see coming, or is coming faster than you thought?
Can I just say very briefly, explaining my hook in that a hockey stick, for if anybody doesn't know, is in like when you're looking at a graph and it just goes up. And he did mention in the video that we are actually at the bottom of the hockey stick for all the tech and changes and everything that's coming. So I thought that was just interesting to think about, considering how much stuff has changed in the last 10 years, and to think that we're so far it's going to go so much more.
Think about in relation to 100 years ago and the hockey stick.
Mm-hmm.
Because 100 years ago, there was some aviation, but there wasn't a lot of aviation at all. And you had to take a boat to go from America to Europe or whatever.
I took a blimp, sir.
Like
a
Blimps.
like this.
You'd probably still be up there if you took a blimp. So the crazy thing is, if you look at the rise of technology, you could say that we're still going up from the initial hockey stick that happened during the 1920s, or the Industrial Revolution, for that matter.
I mean, kind of to put it in a little more recent terms, Tina, you were alluding to just the vast change we've already experienced. I mean, think about, the iPhone. Was it 11 years old now? Is it even 12?
Maybe 12.
Yeah.
Man,
Something
like
like that.
2007, wasn't it?
it feels like it's been with us forever at this point, but in reality, it's just been hardly a decade.
But the iPhone was, technically speaking, the first smartphone. The
Sure.
first smartphone happened 10 years ago.
Well,
And this is an
13,
old
I guess.
smartphone. This is a GS5. This had more space on it than my first laptop.
Right, and that's
Processing power in my first laptop.
that's the big point here is that supercomputers used to be reserved for the governments and the rich and the elite, and now we carry more computing power in our pockets than they did than governments had access to 60 years ago. And I think it's not just that, like free smartphones that they give away, like in Africa, for example, like those people are now getting access to more than rulers had going back not too long ago. So just the idea that technology has kind of democratized computing power and access to things. It's bringing a whole new audience to the internet, and the way things are developing. It's just, we can't continue to think that tomorrow is going to look like it is today. It's going to be vastly different, and it's going much faster. Those guys spent a lot of time talking about 5G, and I was mistaken to think that 5G is going to be pretty similar to the bump from 3G to 4G, and they're like, this is not even in the same realm. Like it's 4G is like a garden hose compared to it's like 100 times more are those the numbers they came up with?
Is gigabit per second. That's messed up. And 1 millisecond of latency
delay.
That is out of this world. Ridiculous.
Well, and the first question I asked was, I can already do so many things with just my 4G or my 3G. I can watch a video on YouTube or a Disney movie as I'm driving down the road. What more do I need? What more is that good for?
Well, I think he talked about, take it out of the personal perspective, and if you're in the hospital and the surgeon happens to be a robot or AI and they're doing precision work, like a glitch in that can be life-threatening. And so getting on 5G helps all of those things kind of progress forward.
Okay. Do you want to elaborate on that, what you just dove into real quick?
That was pretty self-explanatory, no?
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean...
So you're talking about people doing surgeries remotely, so that a surgery could be done in a tent by the best surgeon in the world, but he happens to be 5,000 miles away.
Definitely, yes. And I guess I've seen video footage of like the robot hands are doing, like they're skinning the grape off of the skin off the grape, and like, so that's the future of medicine. And so when you're in something where your life is on the line, you don't want the glitch, you don't want the hold, we're downloading, the or latency, whatever maybe popping up in your phone life. You don't want that happening in the medical world.
Well, the good news is with 5G, we'll just have to have more medical attention. So that's,
Well, he talked about that as being a myth as well. So
yeah, but he's wrong.
So, I wondered about that.
Okay, dive in there.
His answer was it's a conspiracy from outside competitors. Like that is, I completely disagree. I've actually been doing my own studies and looking in my own teachers on frequencies and the reality behind what already happens to our bodies. I mean, let me just back up a second. They don't have a clue what's happening to the human race as far as cancer and different disorders, autism and stuff like that. It is directly related to the so-called technologies that we are subjecting ourselves to on a regular basis. And 5G, I could put a whole smattering of quote unquote proofs that that it's just a conspiracy is, I don't know, I think it's highly irresponsible to, in my opinion, for him to just dismiss it as that. I'm trying to think, is it Aaron Cameron, Club 360? I'm actually going to try to meet him, and he's dedicated his life to understanding frequencies. He works with Rife frequency generators and everything like that. So one of the big things that as they study what happens on a micro level, they use electron microscopes, right? Here's the problem with electron microscopes is that they have such a high energy magnetic field as well as heat generation that anything that electronic microscope can actually look at that's biological actually gets destroyed and shattered by the power of the electron microscope just so that they can look at it. And so literally all they're studying is carcasses of, biological organisms. Rife, back in the early 1800s, I think it was, or 1900s, 1930 or 1920, developed a microscope that could actually look at a 32,000 times power and not destroy the biological materials to look at. And so even how they're studying the effects of things are creating problems. They're using technology to study the effects of technology, and it's layering the biological realities. But yeah, a frequency generation of that caliber of 5G is not just some conspiracy, in my opinion, and that is one of those things that I mean, they can tell you right now. I have a little sticker on the back of my phone that reduces the electromagnetic field of my phone by like 90%. That's measurable stuff, and 5G only increases that. And then don't get me started on AI.
Yeah.
That's a whole other discussion that again, I think their take on it. I'm going to get started on AI anyway.
Well, I'll say
artificial intelligence is not at all what they think. Go ahead.
I was just say, I'm part of a couple biohacking communities, and some of them are almost obsessive over EMFs and ways to reduce and remove them from your environment. I think one thing that Jeff did say was like he would definitely recommend using like a Bluetooth headset as opposed to putting your phone right next to your head every time you have to make a call or something like that. So I think to an extent there's he's suggesting a good awareness of it, but yeah,
I thought it was kind of funny that he said that, like, there's no issue, but I would recommend maybe that.
Right.
Okay.
and then just the general beliefs I think that are probably held by everybody in this call about how how this world exists through energy and vibration and frequencies are dealing in that stuff. So to say that it doesn't have any effect, I think is an interesting take for sure. But I think he was saying that he was had the studies that he'd come across hadn't revealed anything. But
well, any sound studies or something like that, any
sound, I think that were critical of it. Yeah, but
when I think we joked because we had a fun conversation debriefing the video before we had this call between Matt and I. And the thing that I kind of walked away is it's your focus, it's your lens. If you come in just with a scientific logical perspective, then you're not going to think about your frequencies. You're not going to think about the social emotional effect of technology. And on the flip side, if that's all you're looking at is the relationship piece, you're not going to see the benefits of having technology in your life and having those cross things. So finding that balance, I think, is really key, and having multiple perspectives at the table really helps kind of navigate through the different research, the different data, the different topics that we're going to dive into a little bit more.
Well, you seem pretty eager to dive into AI. Let's hear it, man. I mean, that's as far as 5G allowing for greater transmission of data on an order of magnitude. The Internet of Things becomes much more plausible, and then artificial intelligence and the varieties of flavors of artificial intelligence.
I thought that was interesting that he talked about different ones, because I hadn't really heard about that before.
Well, let's go.
I've spent a lot of time in the tech world at the last few years, and I've had some really good conversations with some people that I respect for knowing their shit. And in general, and just back all the way out, you don't even have to be a tech person. Most people, when they think of AI, they think of Terminator, they think of computers becoming self-aware and then wanting to take over and everything like that. And you could see there is, idea like, okay, so if we put certain parameters in the computer and it does the math and says the humans are the bad guy, and so we're going to take out all the humans to solve the problem. But even then, it would still be the parameters that we've put in, right? So artificial intelligence requires, it's not just it in a lot of people's minds, it's this idea of like, oh, we've made something really that like us. And no, the reality is there's only one form of intelligence that we can actually currently pass on to something else, and that is logic. And even then, it is logic that we have to set the parameters of. How did we develop our own logic? It was through other things like intuition and emotion and creative imagination. And we have multiple elements of our consciousness that we don't even understand. And there's no way we can pass on consciousness to machines at this point. Until you understand your own consciousness, how are you going to give it to something else? Right? So we can certainly give it a piece of what we are, but how do you teach a machine to obey their gut feeling that they've had this pizza from this place it's their favorite pizza, but today something feels off about it, and your friend eats it and gets food poisoning and you don't, right? That's that gut feeling that you can't teach a computer. So consciousness is way bigger than logic and intelligence. And they talk about computers being smart and having more knowledge and data, and that's absolutely for sure. But it is a different world than actually duplicating ourselves that most people think of. So, and any discussions around artificial intelligence they frustrate me because there's this massive assumption of what people mean, and it's not true.
A lot of the time people are just referring to machine learning. But so there's, there's artificial intelligence. There's where it's something that's it's a repetitive task. It's something you're able to gain lots of data on, and because of all that data, a machine is able to have more. I don't know if experiences is the right word to use with it, but just like it's able to take that data and form conclusions from that data. Mm-hmm. It's very, very specific. It can be, the gosh, what's even a great example? Something simple that we do happens all the time.
Measuring children's heights.
It can measure children's heights better than anybody else. It's done it, 2 billion times. It's, when you put up that ruler to the kid's head, it's gonna show you like you're like, oh yeah, it's about 4 foot 8 inches and 3/4 of an inch, and then this feels like a horrible metaphor right here.
Maybe better, that it can guesstimate how much your child will grow in the next 6 months.
Projection.
Sure. And then artificial general intelligence is kind of that. I think what a lot of people think about is that when machines can do all like a number of things well, like a human can do a vast number of things well, whereas that first artificial intelligence can only do that one thing. It could do it extremely well. And then there's artificial superintelligence, where it's performing at a level that exceeds an expert in every area of humanity. So do you disagree with any of those, Austin?
I still don't think you can give it consciousness.
Sure.
And so that's the distinguishment. I mean, I know he goes to those levels and it's great, but sure. Pass it intuition, pass it emotions,
let's go driving. That's the example they go with, self-driving cars. So they were theorizing that at a certain point there's going to come a time where self-driving vehicles are far better drivers than humans, and I think it's already kind of being shown as the reality when you go look at driving hours, accidents per driving hour of a human versus a self-driving vehicle. Now, self-driving vehicles have their own issues for sure, like sudden braking for no particular reason because something popped into the imager, the guiding system, that caused it to brake. I've definitely heard of those issues with Teslas, for example, where I just read a tweet from a guy who said that his dad, who he convinced to buy the Tesla because he's a huge fan, his dad had it on the self-driving feature, and he was fully engaged behind the wheel though, and it pulled in front of a semi and then immediately slammed on the brakes. He was able to, since he was ready to drive, he was able to take control of the vehicle and avoid an incident. But that's the minority though. Whereas a human being behind the wheel and falling asleep or getting distracted or any number of things. It causes accidents at a far greater frequency. In the future, they were saying that it's going to get to such a point where there's so many self-driving vehicles on the road that the human driver is the anomaly and more of a danger to the system than anything else.
Right.
Well, it said that they would be able to reduce the traffic deaths by like 94%.
It's wild.
That, and also he did say, like, up as of right now, Tesla has about 2 billion miles of self-driving data in their system that's been feeding to their algorithm to improve their driving AI.
So even if you improved just as fast as their self-driving intelligence there, I don't have 2 billion miles logged. I don't know. Anybody else?
Right. But I think they also talked about like the consciousness piece where it's, when there comes this time where there's going to be an accident, and then how do you put value on one group of life versus the other group of life, and that piece is the piece that I think gets
sure. So
if
like if a grandma is crossing the road and a child's crossing the road and one of them is going to get hit, how does the self-driving software determine which one it is?
Again, it's
right. It's when you saw. Did you ever see iRobot with Will Smith?
Oh, forever ago.
Yeah.
So the basic premise of Will Smith is a character that he does not trust robots. He doesn't trust an artificial intelligence because part of his backstory is that he was in a car accident with another car, and the robot, based on just percentages of survival, chose to save him instead of a little girl. Mm-hmm. And he there's a scene where he's pissed and he's like, a human would have known. It doesn't freaking matter. Save the girl. It doesn't matter if she has a 5% chance and I have an 89% chance. You save the kid. And that's why he doesn't trust the robots, because they don't have that intuitive, emotional part of their intelligence. And I think what's irks me, and even just talking about it and calling it intelligence, every time it's artificial intelligence. And I'm like, no, it's artificial knowledge. Intelligence is something that is internal. It is intelligence, and it is divine, and it is something that must include emotion, and it must include the wisdom of creative capacity that, again, it's just and it comes from, I have such a passion for divine intelligence and that internal reality. And I would agree with Will Smith's character in iRobot. And it is I definitely agree. We should keep going with artificial knowledge robots. That's really great stuff. Just stop calling it something else.
I think that they got into the idea of like smaller companies being able to work with smaller data sets because of artificial inference, I think is the term they use. You may catch that part. Or basically now they're able to make machine learning now. I don't know what the term was, but just it's making it easier for smaller companies to compete, whereas before it was large corporations had this thing on lock, artificial intelligence development on lock, because they were the ones that had the access to the large databases of information, and so nobody could compete with that because Tesla, for example, has got the 2 billion miles driven. That's a lot of data that they can use to improve their system. Whereas somebody were to come up with something new, well, are you starting at zero? Are you paying out the nose to get access to somebody else's data? Like, how are you doing that? So artificial inference is a thing now, but I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that. Like my main driver to bring this up is to say the world is changing drastically, and by the one of the things that got me started with Evolving Parent in general was hearing a talk from Ray Kurzweil and all the things that he was estimated were going to happen by the year 2029. And I was like, man, why is this was years ago. And I was like, why does this really kind of click with me so much? And I was like, because my kids are going to, if they continue to travel down the public school route, they will graduate in 2028 and 2030. It's like, oh man. So the world that they're walking out into, that the public school system is supposed to, educate them and prepare them for, beyond what's happening in our home. like they're going to go into that world that doesn't look anything like it does right now. So I was wanting to hear the Epoch perspective on what kids need to be prepared for that world that they will enter. You know, what kind of skills, what kind of traits, what kind of beliefs do they need to have instilled in them? And then if it, you know, those things, how do you even instill those in them? Like, what's the best route for that? So what do you guys think is super important for kids to have going into that world?
I think, I mean, as technology takes over a lot of the basic jobs,
And driving.
you have to, what?
And
Driving.
And driving. I mean, maybe
that's-
driving is not something we should focus on so much.
But I mean, that's one of the basic jobs too. So,
Sure.
transportation. I think it comes down to obviously the stuff that is related to what Austin is talking about, and that's the divine aspect of humans, the creativity, the ability to imagine and solve, like, look at things from different angles and solve problems. Obviously, yes, AI can, to some extent, I don't know. I think we could go deeper into that topic personally, but just relational IQ and emotional IQ, obviously that's the kind of thing that is going to be a lot harder to teach a computer. Communication and tapping into spirit, so to speak. I feel like those are all things that are going to be a lot harder to teach computers, and maybe not even possible to some extent. So I feel like it's interesting because there's been so much focus on technology and teaching kids technology up until this point, and I think it's going to have to go in a different direction in order to really prepare them, because for one thing, there are so many jobs right now that didn't exist 10 years ago. We have no clue what kind of jobs are going to exist in 10 years, in 5 years, in 3 years. Like, there's going to be so much different stuff. So those are all core things that everybody can use, all the relational things.
See, the thing, when you said the whole thing about the jobs, what if we get to the point where the very highly skilled jobs are done so much better by computers that having a human do those highly skilled jobs is actually a liability? To which point, will it create a higher, how do I get to this point? Humans are going to have to start doing the dumber jobs, quote unquote. Because I mean, like, okay, let's say
When you say dumber,
well, I mean, okay, you have a computer doing an what is that, appendectomy, pulling out your,
you're basically saying stuff that
your
doesn't
appendix?
take years of schooling necessarily, skill wise.
Well, yeah, because if you have
Now,
look at the medical field right now. You can have a difference of diagnostics from one doctor to the other. It's say, for me, last year I had a abscess in my throat. My doctor thought it was strep. If I would have had a doctor that had more experience with abscesses, he could have been like, "Oh, you have an abscess. I can see it right there." So if you have a computer that is diagnosing you and has the ability to scan you, and on top of that, interpret the scans in a way, it doesn't even have to be quote unquote AI or whatever. It can be a dumb computer. It just said, okay, I scanned you and I can see that that was there. So you need this. And the computer could automatically treat you. Would you go to a doctor, a human doctor, that could be like, well, I think you got strep.
with much more limited, knowledge.
You wouldn't want to.
It's tough. I mean, you think about people that have spent time going to school to be a radiologist, for example, and now software's gotten to the point where they it's analyzed thousands and thousands of images, and not only can it do it with a better degree of precision, but it can do it faster, and it can replace several radiologists on staff. So you only need a fraction of what you had to then go ahead and oversee the results.
So you get to that point where, okay, airplanes, cars, production of things, doctors, et cetera, excuse me. And that these are jobs that if a human does it are going to end up being a liability. So then what do we do as humans?
Okay, but this makes me think about also what he said, though, about the whole thing about us as humans being connected to the mass, to the internet, to all of the stuff. So just real quick,
he was using Elon Musk as
I have two things that are actually.
Well, here's what?
But go, Matt.
No, I was just saying, Elon Musk has a company called, or at least releasing a product or a company called Neuralink. And it's the idea that it can be an interface where they kind of thread wiring into your brain that allows you to interact with something else, whether that is the internet or whatever. I mean, we already have it in the terms of, biological prosthetics, where people can interact with a robotic arm and control it with their mind. That's different than interacting with the internet. But I mean, you get to a point where, I guess Google Glasses was a thing a couple of years ago, very short-lived thing, but it'd be something where you don't even have to have a visual signal where people could see people with Google Glasses, and people got upset with people that had Google Glasses on because they're like, don't record me. They would get irritated with it. It's why it was so short-lived, I think. But if you can imagine just the ability to have access to the internet 100% of the time, not having to pull up your phone to look at something, you can just, got it. How much faster you could solve
Or
problems.
I mean, what if you're getting quote unquote downloaded the same kind of program that maybe a virtual doctor would have, or whatever, a digital doctor. Like what if that is a combination?
That still wouldn't work, because you don't have, like what Jen was saying, seeing a robot, quote unquote, robot arm. We lost Austin.
Mm-hmm. He'll come back.
Seeing a robot arm skin a grape.
Right. That kind of skill
that kind of
is
precision.
Not right.
You don't have it.
Right.
The robot arm does not wobble or whatever. And so I feel like, I mean, dang, if you're even thinking of the medical profession, you're thinking, oh crap, what are we going to do here? Doctors are vastly overeducated, or they spend so much time getting educated, and then you still have malpractice. You still have doctors. You still have to, like, you have one doctor that will say one thing, the other doctor that will say another thing.
I think that's tied more to a systematic thing than maybe actual productivity, because you think about, we've talked a lot about biohacking and how it's this big system, and doctors get like a semester of nutrition, and so they're looking at one symptom instead of the whole symptom and all the other factors that are coming in. And so that's why we get a lot of miscues on diagnosis, is because they're not looking at the bigger, broader picture. And so I'm curious, when AI comes into the system, are they looking at that, or are they still just looking at the system? Well, again, it's how we program them.
You're going to have a machine that has access to all of that research.
Hopefully.
All the research.
I mean, there probably is an aspect of people collaborating with it. Yeah, I agree.
Pump the brakes for just a second. Yeah. I'm going to pause the recording.
The kids?
So... So just like in the medical community, there's a potential shift of employability for humans with the way technology is going. I think you can see that across a variety of what are jobs, careers? There we go. A variety of careers.
Industries.
Industries. Yeah, these are all great words.
Yeah.
Teamwork.
And
efficiency.
To me, that's something that creates an interesting problem where human labor essentially becomes devalued to an extent. And like, even though, new industries are being created because of this, and all sorts of new careers and jobs are being created because of this, there's a need to be able to adapt, a need to be comfortable with change and being flexible, because like Tina alluded to earlier, just said earlier, the hockey stick, like we're at the base of the hockey stick right now. Like we feel like so much has changed in just the last 10 years, but man, it's just the beginning of change. And how much more so will people need to be able to adjust to a world where being a doctor is maybe not as much of an option as it was before. It's a very small option for many people, but transportation was mentioned as a potential job. It's the biggest employer in the United States, I believe. That's going to be hit hard. A lot of the repetitive tasks are going to be hit hard. And so you're going to have people that are going to necessarily need to change careers to jobs that are less impacted by this, but other people are going to be making those adjustments too. And so with people being funneled into certain career paths, I think you're going to have, yes, more specialties or more generalization. I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say anymore, but more competitiveness, but less valuable at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think
yeah, you guys can tell you now.
To jump off maybe what you're saying, or I don't know, go a different route. I'm not sure. The skill set, I think interpersonal relationships is going to be the skill set that is going to be heavily, because again, you can't have AI taking care of a child who is irrational and has no pattern. And so, schools, and I think there can be AI in there, but at the same time, a lot of those interpersonal skills, they just can't do. When you think of management roles and having to manage people in a work setting, like, again, you cannot predict how people are going to react and how they're going to handle things. So all of those skills that you have to interact with people are the things that you're going to have to really beef up on. And I think being able to think outside the box and persevere are two really big keys. Because again, we get into these routines, we have these products, we have these timelines, but it's those innovative thinkers who are going to carve a new wave, as well as you get hit with failure after failure or being passed up on promotions or ideas. Like if you just quit, then you're done, but you have to have that perseverance to just keep going until you can create something that makes it for you.
Yeah. And
I was going to say that I don't remember what podcast, who it was, but it was a interview with Andrew Yang, and he was actually talking about that the gamut of jobs in the future is going to be weighted heavily towards interpersonal jobs, jobs that have to deal with people, mainly because of this exact thing that, a lot of these jobs are the repetitive ones, the ones that require a lot of knowledge or whatever, precision, are going to be taken over by computers. Go ahead and say your thing.
Okay. I was just going to say that in relation to one of the things that Jen said is something I had been thinking about too, and the whole thing of innovative thinking. Like, as much as you can teach computers or whatever to do certain jobs really well, or as much as they can do certain jobs really well, I don't think they're going to be innovating and coming up with new ideas for how to do things and better ways of doing things necessarily. I mean, maybe they will at some point. I don't know how quickly that will happen, but just the whole thing of.
So I'm going to put this here now because of that. Quantum computing and the vastly large and incredible processing power that it has. And how does that, I mean, because like it said in the podcast, he says, what was it, the 55-bit computer? Am I wrong in assuming that he said that Google has a quantum computer?
There's one, like, because it's the best out of all of them.
Yeah, it said it already exceeds Summit, which is
The
It was
super
like the
quantum.
football field's worth of processing power,
Mhm.
and it's a little box the size of a
yeah.
Refrigerator. I guess the thing that I kind of was raised a flag for me was because I think Glenn Beck was like, well, how do you know if the answer was right? And his response was, it doesn't have to be right. It's the fact that it computed something and came up with a solution makes it like essentially right. And maybe I misunderstood that when he said that, but I did. Okay, never mind.
No, I mean,
So what was it?
I don't know. I mean, I waited for him to say it. That's why I waited for him to say it, and I didn't hear it. I think he just moved on to where he was trying to go. Ultimately, there's proofs when you take on a math problem. There's a proof if you get it right. So you run it through. Did it
But
work?
if nobody knows the answer and we're giving it to the computer, or do we know the answer and we're waiting for the computer to solve it?
Because the math checks out.
Math.
Because like what he was saying was like the 55-bit computer that they have right now, I think, if I understood this correctly, could crack military grade encryption in hours.
Something like that.
And something like that. And he said from the 55 to the 256-bit computer, it would be able to decode military grade encryption, which is what the banks use and stuff like that, in milliseconds. Now, if you say, hey, quantum computer, figure out consciousness, or figure out
the meaning to life.
The meaning of life.
42.
42.
Is way off.
Like, okay, yeah, whatever. But this is also a computer that you can say, okay, there is a scan. Okay, all the medical records that Google had, that Google has, that they got with names of people and with whatever other personal information, and you can have this computer aggregate all that information, aggregate all those whatever x-rays or CAT scans or whatever it had, and then what level of medical service would this computer be able to give you? On top of that, add the whole 5G thing, that you have basically the ability to be everywhere at once and be receiving information from everywhere, every single place at once. So how, and then on top of that, this computer would actually be able to process that information real time. And what does that look like for jobs? What does that look like for for interpersonal relationship, where maybe this computer would have enough processing power to make you think that you would be relating to someone, or be able to figure out spirits?
Well, and I
don't know. I mean, I'm literally
right, and that's what I'm thinking, because we have so little experience with this, because we don't know what is on the other side of it. What if, like, how much of the aspect of consciousness comes down to mathematics in a way? You know what? Like, if technology gets to know you so well that it can act before you have cognitively decided, which is something that we have discussed in the past on past episodes, and what they talked about also in this video, that because so much of the stuff is subconscious that we do, but a quantum computer, or these computers theoretically, or maybe not even just theoretically, can take all that information that we don't even realize that we're processing through, that we take as intuition, or like a leading from the spirit or something. Like, what if it can do the same kind of thing, because we just don't realize the process is going on in our minds? You know what I'm saying? Like, what if the computer is able to do the same kind of thing, in a sense? We don't know, right?
Then why would we develop that to hand it off to something else for it to do it for us? Like, what would be the process? What would be the purpose of us developing and experiencing and growing this to just be like, okay, AI, do it for me, thanks.
No, I'm not saying that we want it to do it for us, but supposedly, like he talked about Amazon getting to the point where they ship you stuff that you need before you even realize that you need it, type of thing, or where they book a flight of a vacation for you, and then you're like, oh, I think I should go on vacation, but it's already booked for you because it's able to predict. And
but I guess to me that raises up a whole other list of questions. So like consent. So I have had to have consent for this AI to make those decisions for me, because what if I'm like, you know what, I really need a vacation.
Did you read those terms and services agreement?
But my bank account is like, no, you can't. You know, so
but
like
see, the thing is, it would be to that point where it would know your bank account, know what you like to do, know what you like to drink, know how you like to sleep, blah blah blah, and it would say, oh, Jen needs a vacation.
Like, honestly, the only thing I could think of while he was talking about all this stuff is, this sounds kind of like God. How we think of God. Like, knows us, he's everywhere, he can predict what we're doing, blah 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 blah. Like, that's how we tend to think of God. And like, if that really is
Claus.
I don't know.
Is it going to go to work for me? If it's going to go to work for me and bring home the paycheck, then let's do it. I mean,
well, the thing is, like,
it's going to go to work for you and then send the paycheck to Google.
If what happens, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but what happens if we develop, or this, whatever, if you get to the point of having nanotechnology and being able to build at the molecular level? I mean, this is getting fairly Star Trek-y, but do you remember in Star Trek where you'd go and say, hey, hot chocolate, and push the button or whatever, hot chocolate, and the thing would be like, and then you'd have a hot chocolate right there.
Or you say AR-15. Oh, no.
Oh, gracious.
So, I mean, the crazy thing there is, okay, what about a world where we don't have to work?
I mean, yeah, been down that road.
No, I mean,
yeah,
I mean, I guess going back to Andrew Yang, he definitely talked about that as he got into his universal basic income pitch, and we've talked about that in the past episodes.
But this is a world where you don't even need income, or do you? I mean, you don't.
But we need some kind of purpose and drive and motivation to do something.
Definitely, there's always going to be that.
You can definitely switch your motivation from work to being creative, but then it goes back to those basic skills. If you can't create, or if you can't find something to entertain yourself, what is the meaning of life and why live it?
So that's really, I mean, that's getting back to where I wanted this episode to go, which was the idea of like, what kind of skills, traits, beliefs should we be instilling in our kids who are going to enter a world where maybe people are purposely challenged or purpose challenged, where people used to get their sense of purpose from the career that they had. You know, maybe it was, 50 years ago, it was like, hey, I've been working for this company. I'm a company man. Been here for 30 years and I'm retiring and calling it a day. Whereas that's I don't know anybody that's like, yeah, you're going to work for this place for 30 years coming up. Like
you're not in the right setting.
Oh, shoot. I mean, real quick, I pulled up a graphic. I want to attribute it to Max Tegmark in a presentation he did for his book Life 3.0, which deals with artificial intelligence. That's what he calls it, Austin. So, and it's kind of a cool thing. It's got like a little feels like it's straight out of a
fifth grade geology book.
Environmental textbook, where it's got if you can imagine artificial intelligence and things that it does as like a rising tide of climate change. And the warmer it gets, the higher that tide goes. The more artificial intelligence it advances, the higher it goes, and the more these jobs are no longer useful. Like, for example, we used to be the ultimate chess masters. Now, artificial knowledge intelligence has that. Go used to be something they speculated was going to take forever for a machine to be able to learn about. Well, Go has been, top Go players have been beaten by artificial intelligence.
Remind me what Go is?
Go is a game with like I almost say like trillions of possibilities of it's like a board where you're trying to, you place in blue and black, I don't know, rocks, game pieces on a board,
okay,
and you're
yeah,
trying
I
to,
know what it is.
yeah.
I'm trying to
Did it
go.
in China.
Yeah, but the things it has at the top are things like art, cinematography, book writing, science, artificial intelligence design. Lower on the totem pole, it has theorem verification. Up top, it has theorem proving. Has programming in there. But I think in the past, Austin, maybe you've talked about it, where programming is a great skill to learn. However, a lot of programming is being done by coding programs.
Right. Yeah, they're programmed machines and programs.
So leave your coal mining job and go learn to program, go learn to code, so that you
and
can
then just be out of job 20 years later, because other programs are gonna. That was one of the things we talked about in a previous episode about how so many of the jobs in the past, when a new technology would come, when tractors were, tractors came on the scene, then people who made hand plows went out of work, and tractors came on the scene. All the extra farm hands went out of work and stuff like that. But then they got to move to the factories, and then once the factories shut down, then they got to move to the offices. Once the offices shut down, then they got to move to the, I'm saying that in this case, when an industry gets taken out, it's not going to then just have some other void over here of another industry that it's going to be replaced by. The industry that's replacing your existing job is AI and is robots and automation, and so it's already backfilled any other industries that you could potentially go into. So this is very unique in anything else. I think one of the other things that I've been thinking about too is it's not only the removal of jobs and stuff like that, but it's also the increase of population. Right? I was just looking, by 2030, there's supposed to be 8.5 billion people on the planet.
Well,
I mean,
on interesting, if you look at how demographics change and shift over time, like the replacement numbers needed for a nation to maintain its current population is 2.1 kids per family, per married couple, per couple that has kids. And so what happens is that as nations develop, their number of kids they're having goes down. And so you'll find that some people that are, looking towards the future are actually more worried about depopulation, I guess, necessarily, because, where are the population issues at? Not in the United States, not in places where, the nations have already developed. Those nations' birth rates are at like 1.7 or something like that. Like Japan is, I think they're very concerned about population going down.
But
I have heard.
Go ahead.
I have heard people talk about how the world will find it's actually in the Celestine prophecies. Is that one of the ideas is that the world will find its balance, and it'll settle at a particular population amount that matches our planet, and we'll do it on purpose, which would be great.
I mean, there is the whole thing that they talk about of people living longer and longer as well, and death going away, essentially, sickness.
Well, was anyone like, what the crap with the whole CRISPR thing?
Why would Matt be what the crap? He's
well, I mean, not like what the crap, but like,
holy
mackerel, like, wow, this is crazy.
The bioterrorism thing now, that's a little bit of
the what?
Bioterrorism.
Oh.
So CRISPR is gene editing software that can be, you can buy a CRISPR kit off the internet for like $140, I think. Netflix just had a great series on it, Unnatural Selection, I believe it's called. But CRISPR is changing the face of medicine too.
I mean, if you think about it, like you hook up CRISPR to one of these narrow, even if it's a narrow AI in parentheses, you're still, hey, Gulexa, I want to have blue eyes, and the thing goes, and all of a sudden you wake up with blue eyes the next day or something like that. Is that going to be possible? Why not? Right?
All the things, I think.
That's
And I
weird.
think for me, like I would rather so much be so in tune with my spirit and like God, that'd be like, hey, God, I want purple eyes today. And I wake up and I have purple eyes. So again, I think it's the different lens and means in which you get to the result that you want.
So if we shifted this towards a spiritual perspective, what kind of, I guess, spiritual traits or beliefs do you think kids need to have to be able to operate in this world that's constantly changing and purpose is changing? And
Definitely. I think the one that pops out to me is like, at first I was like, I am enough, but even taking it back and just like, I am. And, you know, that whole process of God is in me and I am in God and there is no separation. And so wherever I go, God is literally there. And, you know, it's not like you can't just, and one day I'm with God and I am God and those things, but it's thinking about what I do and say is a representation of God, and I can have this communication with him back and forth. And when I think, he thinks, and just that whole oneness, which is not a one Sunday school lesson talk.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking as well that I think things are going to continue to trend more spiritual, because that's going to be a differentiation between humans and computers. So just in general, everything related with spiritual and the continued understanding of that played out in science, in a sense. We recently we're part of a conversation with a guy named Perry Marshall, which I hadn't heard of before, but he's doing some really interesting stuff with relating science and spirituality together. And there's just, I don't know. I think that whole trend towards the spiritual side of things is going to continue to gain along with the technology.
There's definitely something there in the sense that people that aren't even necessarily religious, maybe atheistic, are beginning to gather together and have like Sunday meetings, not necessarily church, but Sunday meetings or whatever it is. Just it's as things have shifted away from everybody congregating. I say everybody from an American perspective, but congregating in church on Sunday, and people moving away from the church, but still wanting to get together, still wanting to fill that relational gap. Definitely something there to that.
So I'm curious, you say, on one, you guys talked earlier about machines figuring out what God is and what consciousness is. And then you also said that having a spirit is what would set machines aside from humans.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that I thought they would necessarily figure that out. I was comparing, like, what if some of that mathematical stuff is equated to some of the stuff that we see as spiritual or as intuitive. Like, because we're not able to currently consciously recognize all the subconscious computing that's going on in our minds, how much of that is correlation, like with, maybe correlation is the right word, but paralleling what quantum computing might be able to do. Like, because we don't know yet how that all looks, like, what if we find that because of what they're saying as far as being able to take all of that vast amount of information and spit it out quantitatively or whatever, how much of that might be the same kind of thing as what our subconscious is doing? Just that I don't know if you're understanding what I'm saying, but I understand what I'm saying. Like, I know what I'm saying. I don't know if I'm able to like articulate it, but I'm just curious because we don't understand well what our subconscious does, and because we don't understand well where some of our intuition and stuff comes from. What if we find that a computer is able to mirror some of that we see as spiritual right now? And not saying it's not spiritual, but
what if are you saying the thought that I'm getting is like, it seems like as of now, a lot of these streams of technology, of human interaction, of spiritual things, of whatever, are separate streams. And what if we get to a point where where this quantum computer brings us to the intersection of all those things,
right,
and helps us understand the intersection of all these things, where technology and spirit and emotions and human interaction, et cetera, are all brought together in a way that makes sense.
It's almost like using science or AI to explain the why of science. I'm sorry, of spirituality.
right.
Well, like, yeah, exactly. Like it could tell us what is spirit, you know, or how does it work within us, or how do we react to something done in the spirit, in a sense. I don't know.
And I'm not saying necessarily that it's like going to spit that out on its own accord, but what if we can interpret some of this stuff?
I guess for me, that still takes away the relationship that you would have with spirit, because I'd be relying on this data point from this machine that I've put in the parameters of its intelligence to spit back. So it's not going to be able to give me some deeper cognitive revelation unless I'm having a connection with the spirit and the spirit is revealing it. But again, you'd have to develop those skills in order to take the data from the AI and connect it to bigger revelations.
Yes, potentially agreed about the connection with spirit, and in connection also with that quantum computing. However, what I'm thinking is, like, if the quantum computing is getting a download of, or is being programmed with a vast amount of information that you would never cognitively have access to yourself without it being downloaded to you specifically or through spirit. But what I'm saying is, like, what if the quantum computing concept is somewhat similar to being tapped into spirit, in the sense that it is combining the collectiveness, the collective understanding of things. Like, I think it's conceivable that could be the case, that you could, if just because, yeah, we're putting in this little bit of information, putting in this little bit, but no, what if it has access to all of the information? Not to mention, we talked about our brains being connected so that we could access information. What if it's going the other direction as well? What if it's at some point somehow able to read our thoughts?
Only if I sign the waiver.
And then gathering all of that into an ability to actually calculate those things. Like, at some point, that to me, that just sounds like a God machine, in a sense. Obviously, not as intuitive. However, accessing all the people, like, that's a lot to work with.
Sure. Well, I mean, we've been going for a while now. Maybe it's time to go wrap things up. Go around the circle here in a second.
Let's just pull the plug.
Right.
Let's pull the plug on the machine.
So, just to reemphasize here and kind of wrap up those last few comments, they used to say that the quantum computer was far off. Well, it already happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, things are changing faster than anticipated, and they are only going to change more. Hence the hockey stick we've mentioned a couple times. And then to paraphrase somebody from somewhere, technology that is significantly advanced from where we are. Like, if you were to take a cell phone back to year one, and throw the flashlight on, and be like, "Oh my God, you are God." Technology that is significantly advanced is indistinguishable from magic. And so it is curious to think about, as things change, as technology significantly increases, like, how much is revealed. Maybe that's kind of what you guys were digging at there. But You guys ready to go around the table here?
Let's do it.
Well, you start.
I think my hook was computers bringing families together since 1936, and did some quick Googling, and 1936 is when the first modern computer was created or designed. He actually was a scientist who made it in his family's living room, right? And so as we talk about AI, we talk about computers, we talk about technology, and then we talk about what is the future of our children? Where do we go? What skills do we give them? In reality, it's just how much can we be together as human beings, as creators? How much can we interact with each other, our internal worlds, to better the external world? Because we can program computers and AI to do what we've asked them to do, but they're not going to be able to create new things. They're not going to be able to create the next phase. That lives in us, and that's our identity. So Matt's making a weird face, but that's what I believe. So therefore, it's my truth. There you go.
Oh, I'm sorely, man, I'm tempted to not say this, but I'm going to say it, and then I'm just going to let it float out there. You know what we should do?
No, I don't know.
Burn it all down.
We should make computers in our image and likeness.
That's your statement? Okay.
That would have been a good hook.
I mean, that's definitely something that I've considered multiple times over the course of this podcast, as we've dived into, not this specific episode, but the history of this podcast, as we've talked about different things like this. And I think what I've come back to in this conversation, at least, is that however much a machine might appear to have consciousness in any sort of sense based on the information that it has access to, I'm not sure how much it's ever going to really have a personality. And to me, I still am of the belief that God has a personality and is personal, et cetera, et cetera. So, I don't know. I think that's still going to be a differentiation. However, as Austin said, making computers in our image, it's going to be a matter of how do we pass on the concept of spirit. I don't know. It's going to be interesting this next 10 years for sure.
I almost said something about biocomputers. I was thinking, well, what if computers would be a tool to augment humans to the point of coming up with a whole new level, or
transhumanism?
Well, no, like a whole new category or level of jobs that we would be able to do to give us a purpose. I don't know.
But also transhumanism.
But also transhumanism. The end.
Right on. Gosh, man, there's so much to go through here, but I think imagination is a biggie. Curiosity is a biggie, and being able to adapt and being secure in who you are as a person. Those are all things that I really want our kids to be able to hang their head on going forward, regardless of what happens. Those are things that are going to be important. Those are going to be useful tools. Like software, artificial intelligence can brute force new creations through data. I've seen some pretty crazy like vehicle frame creations based off of artificial intelligence designs, and they look alien, and they're crazy cool looking, and they prove to be vastly stronger than some of the things that we've created. But being able to just make connections that machines can't, I think, is going to be huge going forward. And to hit on Austin's closer there, I think just man, software is programming is logic. So when you look at the logos, if you will, the simulation world we live in, perhaps, I don't know. But what a weird episode. Conversation worth having.
For sure.
If you are interested in more of these conversations, we've got a backlog of episodes at this point. We've got more in us we want to do. You can check out our website, theepoch.org, to find those past episodes. And there you'll find a link to our Patreon where you can support new episodes. And if you want to contribute to future episodes yourself, maybe guide the discussion a bit. We have changed how we're doing things in this calendar year for 2020. Find us on social media at Epic Ideas and put your suggestions forth that way. Or, gosh, man, if you hop on that Patreon and suggest something, you'll have our full attention. So, yeah. I miss anything?
You guys are awesome.
Everybody. I was talking about people on the call right now, but yeah, no. Listeners too.
Everybody.
Everybody.
So, love you guys. Don't be scared of the future. We got this. We'll rise above the machines.